Why is it so important to put profit before growth? What's up, blue collar business owner? Welcome back to the Blue Collar Prosperity Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Maskill, where we focus on helping guide you to have a prosperous business. Today, we have with us Teddy Slack. Teddy is an entrepreneur, author, and coach who built and sold his last home service business and now helps contractors across the country increase profits, buy back their time, and build businesses that can sell for life-changing multiples. And he's working on a new project that we'll probably get into today, but that is Teddy Slack. Welcome, Teddy. Thank you so much for being here. What's going on today?
Yeah, not much, man. Thanks for having me on, Paul. This is great. I'm super excited about this.
I am as well. We've had several conversations over the last few months. Your story is inspiring. Your story's got all the ups and downs. So for those people that don't know Teddy's story, give everybody just kind of insight into how you got into the trades and how you got to, eventually selling a business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of born into it. My father was an entrepreneur. He started off as a landscaper back in the 70s, basically bootstrapped his way and got into the environmental industry, was doing, real commercial, basically industrial, commercial, environmental work. So big DPW yards, big tanks, like 20,000, 50,000 gallon tanks for gas stations and industrial buildings. So, basically my whole life, I grew up just working, for him. And even as a little kid, there's pictures of me at 4 years old on a backhoe, So I started out as a young guy, just kind of following my father's footsteps. He sent me to college because he thought that was the right thing to do back then. And, I went, but I didn't learn anything about business. I did study business and marketing, but as many people know, it's not really applicable to when you get out in the real world. So when I got out of college, he said, hey, you've been working out in the field, because he would only let me work in the field as like a laborer my whole life, but after I got out of college, he's like, well, now you've earned your keep, right? You want a position in the office. I'll give you this desk over here, and we're going to try to start this residential division. Now, he didn't do any residential environmental work at the time. And he basically said, I'm not going to give you any money or anything, but if you can get the phone to ring, he's like, here's a desk, basically a yellow notepad and a pencil. He's very old school, no computers, nothing like that, and I was like, all right, let me see what I could do. So this is around 2005. PPC was just starting to take off with Google, and he was doing all yellow pages marketing and stuff like that back then, and I was like, let me try this PPC stuff out, and thing took off like crazy. We started a brand new division, went from 0 to 1.3 million in the first 12 months with, brand new name. I created the logo, the website, I did everything, got us pretty much digitally native back then in 2005. Yeah, and that's how I got my start, really. And I worked for the family business up until about 2009, so for about 5 years. Unfortunately, my mother was part of that business, and she unfortunately passed away. She had cancer. So at that point, things got a little bit hairy in the business. It got tough to work with the old man, and I decided to go off on my own. So I left there. I started my own residential oil tank business, and same thing, went from 0 to, basically, I think we did like $1.5 million in the first 12 months. Same thing, no name, no website, nothing. And all digital marketing and just boots on the ground, just going door to door to like different realtors and things of this nature to try to drive revenue. And, I was 20 years old, so I was a kid, and things got to my head, at that point. I did this twice. I'm like, oh, I could do this with anything. This is so simple, right? Like I'm a genius, like that's what you start thinking as a young kid, you've done it twice. There's no failures out of that point. And I did. I mean, I went to a lot of different directions, man. I started a bunch of companies. I partnered with people. And, I was successful in a lot of the things, but, what happens is when you spread yourself too thin, what I learned was, you just can't do that. Like it's, you got to focus, right? That's what I learned over the years. Cause you could be successful in a lot of different ways, but if you don't have the right team and right people around you and the right systems, which I didn't understand any of that stuff back then. I mean, I was taught by my father, who's very old school. I mean, the guy is, like I said, no computers, nothing like that. Just, he's a hustler, and he just knows how to generate money. But, the way he operates his business, he looks at his bank balance and he's like, yeah, we got money, we're good. You know what I mean? If this bank balance starts to fall, he starts to stress out, and now he's like, hustling again, trying to get more money. And that's kind of what I was taught. So I didn't learn any systems or processes or anything through him,
Yeah, so let's kind of take it from there, because obviously a lot of the things we talk about on this podcast is numbers, building prosperity, building wealth, having a business that is actually creating consistent positive cash flow, all those things. And I think one of the first things that you mentioned we'll kind of hit on is we see it all the time. It's easier than ever now because of social media and podcasts and influencers and all that, is the bright, shiny objects. You went 100 different ways And when we look at, like, stop and look at the most successful people in the home service world, they usually just do one thing and they do it really, really well. And they just takes a long time, right? You just keep doing it over and over. And eventually you build a really big, electrical company or a really big HVAC company. Well, the people that try to do 17 different things, they don't really do great at any of them. So what were some of your learning lessons there as you started to have this success, got to your head and you're like, oh, I'm going to try this. I want to try this. I want to do this. Give us a little insight into that.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it got to my head. I was like, all right, I could do this. So the next thing I did is, so I hired a guy. He was basically an entry-level labor position. I put an ad in the paper back then. It was 2011, and he came off an $11 an hour ad. And essentially, he came from the background of emergency response, environmental cleanup emergency response, which is a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different than what I was doing. I was doing residential work. I worked directly for homeowners, oil tank removals, environmental cleanups. So he came as a laborer, and he's like, I come from this emergency response business, which is basically now you're working for companies that like flip over on the side of the road, their trucks. And now you're going out there 24/7 and you're cleaning up the side of the road. You're cleaning up the trucks. You're going into their factories or warehouses. If they spill a drum, it could be hazardous materials, and you're cleaning this stuff up. So I didn't know anything about this industry. And this guy was like, listen, I got myself in a little bit of trouble. I have a little bit of a background, but I'm clean now. I'm good. I'm on the, straight and narrow. He's like, but I know a lot about this industry. If you ever want to get into it, I'm like, for 6 months, I told him, no, this is what I know. I'm going to do this. But eventually he's like, listen, I'm going to leave. And, unless you want to start this company. And I said, listen, present me a breakdown. What do you think it would cost? What equipment we need? Let's see, if you know it so well, which he proved to me that he did know the industry really well. And, but that was a major red flag. Like now I would never get into a partner, and I didn't partner with the guy, but I gave him an opportunity. I basically backed him to start this division. And he had a history, he had a background, and it was just not a good decision. But again, young kid, didn't really know what I was doing. Basically what happened was, though, we started off and bootstrapped the thing. I put a little bit of money into it, brought some used equipment. And again, we hit $2 million in revenue the first year. So now I have two companies that are doing roughly like $3.5 million in revenue. And he was running the whole operation. I was doing all the back end, basically helping with accounting, the bookkeeping, marketing, and things of that nature, operations. And it went really well for years. And then eventually things went south. I mean, he, his old ways kind of popped up, and he started, making fake invoices. All these things were happening in the background that I started catching things. And I had to let him go, and I had to shut the entire business down. And, definitely that hurt me. That was the first time I got hurt in business where, it affected me for sure.
Yeah. And even to that point of the, whether it's the owner or somebody else, but if the entire business is really built on one person, their expertise and their ability, just like we talk about all the time on the show, like we need to build this business so it can run without us, which means we need those layers of protection. If so-and-so leaves, we're still good. Or if I want to go on vacation for a month, we're still good. So I know, as your journey goes along, you really start to realize that the bottom line is more important than the top. And
100%.
Getting profitable, knowing our numbers. How did that kind of transpire? And, what were some of the biggest lessons learned there?
Yeah. So that's exactly it. I mean, initially when I was young, I chased top line revenue. That's why I went in so many different directions. I mean, at one point I had 75 employees in about 5 different companies. I was flipping real estate. I flipped 24 houses. I did full gut renovations, added levels. I did 24 of those in 24 months. So I borrowed $8 million essentially. I started a fund where I was raising capital for that while I had all these other companies going on. So you can imagine the stuff that I had going on. Then I had a door knocking business. I had 25 guys in the Bronx knocking doors for me, selling energy deregulation, which I partnered with a friend. Just went into all these different directions simultaneously, chasing that top line revenue, right? So once everything kind of basically fell apart because I was stretched too thin, that's when I started reading a lot of books. And I'm like, all right, obviously I don't know what I'm doing here. I got my ass kicked here over the last, 7 years. I made money. I generated probably 50, 60 million top line revenue, but really I didn't have much to show for it, And I was like, all right, this is not the right way to run a business. So I got to educate myself. So I started reading a lot of books. And that's in 2018 when I started reading a ton of books about running a business that doesn't depend on you and how to build a company for value purposes services and how to know your numbers and track your numbers and all these things. And literally life changed for me almost, I say almost overnight, because that's what it felt like. It was like I was living one life that prior to reading and educating myself as far as running a business. And then once I educated myself, I was like, holy shit, I wish I had known this 10 years ago. Like I would have been so much better off, and that's when I basically restructured everything, went back to my core business of residential oil tank removals, remediations. I started a company called Simple Tank Services. Hence the name. I want to keep everything very simple, focused, and streamlined. And I started that business with the intention of selling it in 3 years. That was the goal. I was like, I'm starting this company. I'm getting out of this industry for good. I want a nice exit. And that's exactly what we did. That went from basically 0 to 4 million in 18 months. Very clean books. I mean, I'm talking, I set that thing up. I was out of the day-to-day in the first 12 months. I had a salesperson who stepped in my role. I had fully operational marketing. Everything was set up to where it didn't depend on me. I got obsessed with the numbers, obsessed with the EBITDA. And when I sold that business, we were 43% EBITDA in home services, which is pretty much, it's unheard of. Most people I talked to are like, holy shit, how did you get it that profitable,
Yeah, that's, pretty much unheard of. But I think what people don't see is call it 20 years before that of what you had to do to get to that point. And I know we always have man, if I knew then what I know now, I could go from 0 to 20 million so much quicker.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, we could, but unfortunately we have to go through that, learn all that, and then we can do it quicker, the second, third, or fourth time. So as you made that complete transformation, what were some of the numbers that you paid attention more than it? Because you remove yourself from the business, you're running this thing as, the CEO, the CFO, you're looking at it. What numbers were you looking at, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to know if you're in the right track?
Yeah, I got obsessed with tracking everything. I had a Google sheet. That's how I did it back then. It was just basically, Excel or Google Sheets, whatever, and just tracked. I tracked everything, every phone call that came in there. I recorded every phone call that came in. I tracked every lead, my closing percentage. I was obsessed with that, and because, in order to pass off the sales, I wanted to make sure, all right, if I could close at 60, 70%, I want to make sure if I pass it off that they're closing close to that. Obviously, they're not going to close as good as you, usually as the owner, but, all those decisions. Labor efficiency rate. I was tracking essentially every number that you could possibly think of that could keep you in line to make sure that, if things start to fall off track, you just, at that point, you're just watching numbers, right? That's what it came to for me. I was remotely running the business. I wasn't in the office at this point. And the main reason I got myself out of the day-to-day is because I knew the number one value driver for the business was don't be involved in the day-to-day. I was obsessed with that. I was like, all right, I'm going to get myself out of this thing. I don't want it to depend on me. So I'm like, literally, I didn't go to the office. I was remotely running the business. And I just looked at all the KPIs, phone calls, closing rate, revenue, obviously, but more importantly, the gross profit margin. I got obsessed with the gross profit margin and the EBITDA. Those type of things is kind of what I obsessed over. And that helped me run the day to day.
Yeah. And it's so interesting when you really start to drill into those numbers. Some of the things you mentioned that I think everybody out there needs to track: your call booking rate, how many calls are coming in and how many are we actually booking, whether we're going out in person or we're giving an estimate over the phone, whatever it is, how many, people that need our service, we're actually, giving them the opportunity to do business with us. So then how many are we closing? What's our average ticket? What's our gross profit? And what's wild is, I think especially in the last 2 to 3 years, everyone's realizing that it's a lot harder to get leads than it was in 2020 and 2021. But we also need to realize that if we fix all these things, we don't need more leads. If we get better at booking the calls, if we get better at closing them, if we get a better average ticket, if we get better recurring revenue, like all these things, we don't need any more leads, which then drives down our marketing costs, drives down a lot of other expenses, and at the end of the day, increases the EBITDA. 43% EBITDA, phenomenal thing, probably sold very quickly. You did something in that business that I've learned through our conversations that I think is probably becoming more and more prevalent now. But give our listeners kind of an insight into how you guys were quoting and selling things and how much of an advantage that actually gave you.
Yeah, well, I changed it's a very niche industry, not a lot of competition. If there's 100 contractors in the entire state, I would say that's pretty, maybe there's 100 guys, so compared to like a roofing industry, there's thousands, just in the state. So it's a very, very niche industry. And I changed the pricing around. So that was the one thing that I did that really took us from 0 to 4 million very quickly. And I got a lot of pushback. So I had a partner in the business, somebody who was in the industry for 30 years. I actually partnered with him when we started this thing growing up. And he was very old school, very similar to my father, and he was set in his old school ways. But, as I was reading all these books, I'm like, listen, this is what we're going to do. I want to test these things. Let's go to a flat rate model. And, we'll start quoting these things over the phone and instead of running out to every job. So we streamlined the quoting process, but we changed the pricing around. So in the industry, the way it worked is, you would give a starting price for an oil tank removal. Let's say it's $1,200, but there's a lot of unknowns because you're working underground, right? So you don't know if there's underground utilities. You don't really know a lot of times how big the oil tank is, what's inside of it. Is it oil, water, sand? There's all types of things that can be inside the tank. So there's a lot of unknowns. So the contractors would give a line item and say, well, it starts at 1,200, but depending on what we find, it could go up from there. And then the removal could sometimes be an invoice of 12, it goes from 1,200 to 2,500, 3,000. So a lot of people don't like that. They get mad. They're like, oh, you quoted me 1,200. They don't read the contract. They don't see the line items. You know what I mean? They just don't understand the homeowners, right? So I'm like, all right, how do I fix this? And then let's see if this will help with our closing percentage. So what I did was I just took a subset of jobs over like a 90, 100 to 20 day period. I saw, okay, how many line items did we charge for? And I just did an average. I said, all right, on average, we're charging like $350, $400 a job. Let's just add it to the 1,200. Let's make it flat rate. The number was like $1,500. I'm like, and that's it. Includes everything, permits, everything. And our closing percentage went through the roof. I mean, we really went from like 40-something% up to like 70% because everybody was like, whoa, nobody else is offering this. Like, this is flat rate. You mean everything is included? I'm like, yes, everything. Boom, boom, boom. And it became very easy to sell. And I was selling it over the phone. And also I was able to now train an admin girl in the office to sell it because she didn't get all those questions about the line items. Like, so that was the easy. If you make it simple and easy, it's so simple to pass it off because it's like, no, it's $1,500. There's a couple qualifying questions she would ask the homeowners, but once she got past those, like, hey, where's the tank located? Is in the front yard, backyard, that type of stuff, basic questions. And then once she got the answers to it, she'd be like, all right, here's the quote. And people were like, really? And then 5 minutes later, they had it in the inbox in their email. So we streamlined that whole process, and our competitors were like, yeah, well, I got to come do a site visit. I got to look at your house. And then it would take them 3 days to get the proposal. So who do you think the homeowner is going to sign on with? They're going to sign on with the person who's fast, efficient. If you're fast and efficient when you're sending the proposal out, you're most likely going to finish the job and complete the job that way. So they get to trust you, and they're like, all right, let's sign with this company. And that's kind of what happened with the tank removals. And then as far as, the profits go, in that industry, tank removals you don't really make money on it. I mean, I'm bringing out $400,000 worth of equipment to pull a tank for $1,200, $1,400. I mean, I gotta have 2 guys in the job. I got a couple trucks out there, excavators. I mean, you're not making any money. There's no profit in that. The profit is, unfortunately, if it leaks, now you're doing the environmental cleanup. This is where it could range from 8,000 to hundreds of thousands, depending on how extensive the leak is. So this is the scary part for the homeowner. A lot of the times this is where the contractors would take advantage of homeowners because they'd be like, well, now I'm going to get my foot in the door for $1,200, but then I'm just going to go keep digging and digging and digging until the invoice is, $50,000, $100,000, whatever. And that happened a lot in the industry. And, the industry had a very bad name. So what I said is like, let me give these homeowners some comfort. Let me give them an option where it's a fixed price. And I went out there and I drilled, and this came back to my father. So because he was in the commercial space, he utilized what's called the geoprobe. It's a rig that you go out and you would drill the soil. But no homeowner would hire anybody to do what we call the soil delineation. That's where you drill down and you're figuring out how deep the contamination is, how far it traveled. But typically this is like a $4,000 service. So I said, well, how much does it cost for this machine? I'm like, all right, it's $100,000. I'm like, I'm going to buy this machine and I'm going to see, like, for me to provide this service, it's really just my guy's time at this point. I'd send a guy out there to do the investigation. So I'm like, for $600, I'll come out and tell you exactly how much contamination is in the ground. None of the competition was doing this. They were like, what? You can't make money doing that. I'm like, again, I don't want to make money. I don't care. The $600, this is like a marketing expense for me. Like, this is a lost leader, whatever. And then I would give them a flat rate. I would say, listen, I did the drilling. Here's your quote. It's $16,750. So we're like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And it's guaranteed. I don't care if it costs me $50,000. I'm going to do the job for $16,750. So again, nobody in the industry was offering this. So boom, closing rate went through the roof and my profit margins went through the roof because there was a built-in like fluff in there. I would build it in. I would say, all right, probably this is going to cost me whatever number. And I would add some additional money on there just to make sure I was safe. And some jobs I wouldn't make as much money. Some jobs I actually lost money, but on overall, if you look at a subset of 50 jobs, it was very profitable. And that's what helped drive the profit margins up to that 43% profit margin.
Both sides of the story are amazing. Some of the notes I took that I think everybody can take away with really, the end part of that is the mentality that I think most businesses, but trades in general, have that mentality. Well, we've always done it this way. Right?
Yes.
We've always done it this way. But for the people that are reading the books and staying up with what's going on, I'm a big fan of Marcus Sheridan and all the stuff he puts out. Like we need to do things differently, even if you follow the Savannah Bananas. Jesse Coles does things differently. Everyone thought he was crazy until it worked. And they're like,
Yeah.
holy cow, like, why didn't we all do that? Why didn't we all think of that? But just because it's always been done that way, if we just stop and question, well, is there a better way to do it that serves the client better? If the answer is yes, they will pay a premium for that because they are sick and tired of the old way of doing things. And it's frustrating because when they go buy other services that are streamlined and efficient, they're like, why can't these guys figure this out? Like, why are they still doing this the same way as they have been for 50 years? And really kind of wrapping that part up is the simplicity. When a customer is confused, they're not going to buy.
Yes.
When it's
100%.
super simple, they're going to buy because they know exactly what they're getting, what's included, what does it cost, and what are the expectations. So awesome story there. So now you've got this thing rocking and rolling. You've kind of flipped the industry on its head. You're making good money. And now you obviously decide, even when you started the business, you were building it to sell, which in my opinion is a great way to build any business. How did that kind of transpire of like, all right, I think I'm ready to take this to market? And what did that process look like?
Yeah. So again, we had the intention to do this. We had a 3-year plan. It was me and another guy. You know, the whole intent to build this business was to build it for value purpose, not really lifestyle purposes. You know, we weren't really taking much money out of the business in the beginning. And then we got it to a point where it was at 1.6 million in EBITDA essentially yearly by year 3. So, again, 43% wasn't a big top line revenue. But again, you got to remember this industry, to scale this business, this is one of the main reasons I wanted to get out of the industry. To scale this business, for every crew, which I had 4 crews, you needed close to $500,000 worth of heavy equipment just to generate about $1 million in revenue. So that's not really a good return on your investment, especially when this equipment costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to maintain. You blow a tire, it's $1,000. You got to get towed, it's $4,000. Like everything that would go on with this equipment was thousands, 10 grand, 5 grand, 15 grand. So it was a very difficult business to scale. And this is one of the main reasons why I want to exit the industry, because if I want to scale this thing to, 15, 20 million, I mean, I would have had millions and millions of dollars in equipment and specialized employees and, licenses. They all need to have their own license, not only to drive the heavy equipment, operate the equipment, but also to pull the oil tanks. They need to be licensed by the state. So you can't just hire a guy off the street and be like, hey, go pull this oil tank. No, they had to go through training. They need OSHA certification. I mean, it was a very complex business to run. And you know what? I grew up in the industry, so I didn't know any better. And that was the first business I started. So I just figured, all these businesses this is how it is to run a business. I mean, every job needed a 300-page report when the tank leaked. I had to compile a 300-page report, not me personally, but my business had to compile a 300-page report, submit it to the state. They would review it and give you a clean, better bill of health, essentially. Like, how many industries are you putting a 300-page report to get, so you can get paid for the job? I mean, it's very just heavy to run this job, in this industry, very difficult to run this business. So I'm like, all right, I got to get out of this industry. I want to get into something different. And yeah, so we got it to about 4 million top line, 1.6 million in profit. And I was ready to go to market, and we talked to a couple brokers, and then my partner was like, well, what about, we had a junior partner that we brought in. We gave him a very small piece of equity. He had like 3% equity, younger kid. He's like in his 20s. He's like, what about, Matt? I'm like, well, if he could get the loan, because we were going to tap out a $5 million SBA loan. We were pushing like a $7.6 million sale. And I was like, if he can get the SBA loan and we could work out a deal and, on a little seller note or whatever, I'm like, hey, more power to him. I don't care, but that's the number I want. That's what I know it's worth. It was a 5 times multiple is what I was looking for back then. And he was able to get it. So we wound up selling to him, and he maxed out the loan, and we never went to market. We actually sold it to our junior partner. He got the SBA loan. We did a seller note, and we, ran off to the sunset.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Congrats to you. Kudos to you. I know people only see the what happens at the finish line, and the backstory to that's about 20 years in the making. So
yes.
You sell the business. Currently, you're helping other people, coaching, consulting, helping them figure out how to get their time back, how to make more money, really how to build a business that's sellable at some point, even if you don't want to sell it. You're also venturing into a new space for you. You're starting a roofing business. what transpired in order for you to go make that happen? I know plenty of people like, man, if I would have sold a business, I'd never do anything again.
Yeah,
Ironically, most of those people after like 6 weeks are like, I got to do something because it's in their blood, right? Like you can't just sit around and do
100%.
nothing. So you're starting a roofing business. What does that look like?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly that. I mean, I sold the business. I mean, I always knew I wasn't going to be done. I mean, I was still young. I mean, when I sold, I was 42 years old. I mean, I knew I wasn't retiring, and it was nowhere near retirement money. And even if it was, again, it's in my blood. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. There's no way I'm just going to walk away and just hang on a beach, So, yeah, I did some consulting, and I actually got a chance to look into other industries, which I never had that opportunity. Right. So again, I came from this environmental industry where it was very, very intense to run this business. And I started learning all these different business models, and I was like, whoa, I'm like, this is like, this is pretty, I mean, listen, nothing is simple. Everything has its nuances. Every company, every industry has issues, but like when you compare it to an industry like the environmental industry, it's like, wow, the business model is way easier. And I started consulting for a buddy of mine. Actually, I was his best man at his wedding. We grew up together, went to high school together, and he's in the roofing space / solar, and they're pretty big. I mean, they do about 60 million in top line revenue. He was started in the solar industry, and he started buying roofing companies, and he had no real experience with marketing besides door to door, because he came from the solar space. And I'm like, listen, you want to generate leads, I can help you. So I started helping him out, with some marketing and consulting with him a little bit. And that's where I started learning about the industry. And I'm like, whoa, I'm like, this business model, I'm like, it's essentially marketing, sales, fulfillment. That's it. And in New Jersey, there's no permits, no inspections, which, I mean, let me tell you something. New Jersey, there's 550 townships. Each township has its own rules, and each town, you have to have your own application process. So if, like, for tanks, I worked with at any given time 100 different township applications. I had girls just managing permit applications all the time. So that alone is like simplifying this process, because like, all right, I just need to market to get leads, and then I have to sell the leads, and then I have to put a roof on and get paid. I'm like, okay, there's 3 steps here. You're like, this is really basic shit. Like, holy shit, I can think I could do this, So yeah, so I fell in love with the space. I'm like, I started learning everything I can about it, and yeah, so we're going retail only, no insurance. It's straight retail, and yeah, we're in New Jersey market. I'm going to bring a lot of new tech, not new, but new to some companies in the space. So there's a lot of companies in the country that are using it, but I'm going to be like, try to do some, a lot of over the phone sales. I'm going to try to do things of that nature that are a little bit different. And yeah, try to come up with a flat rate pricing. These are things that I'm working on right now to try to change the industry a little bit in that aspect, like I did in the environmental space. So I'm excited about it. It's an exciting venture. It's a new industry for me. I've teamed up with some guys that are in the space that have some experience, and yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see where it goes.
Love it. And I mean, for me, the takeaway, kind of how you wrap that up, is we as business owners, we have to be willing to try different things, knowing that they might not work. To me, the biggest advantage of being a small business is we can decide today that we're going to change our sales process, and we can literally change it today, versus a big corporation or even a private equity backed entity that's, hundreds of millions of dollars. They're like, we think we're going to change our sales process.
Yeah.
And it takes 6 months to 36 months. Whereas the smaller guys, it's like, we can change today, try it out. If it doesn't work, tweak it, learn from it, and continue to get better. So excited to see where you take that. As we wrap this up, Teddy, I know we've talked about a lot of things. We want our listeners to take immediate action here. If you could recommend them doing one thing in their business within the next 24 hours to move closer to the goal of having a business that can run without them, what is one thing that you would have them do?
100%. The first thing I would do as soon as you hang up and you stop listening to this podcast is start doing what's called like a time audit. So this is something I learned back in 2018 when I did it. It changed everything for me, because as entrepreneurs and business owners, you don't really realize what you're working on every day. It's like, it's just second nature, right? Because you do it every day. So you're like, oh, I don't know. When someone asks you, well, what do you do every day? You're like, well, I don't know. I run my business. I do this. I do sales. I do a little bit of marketing. I do some books, whatever. You're not really sure what you do every day because it's just second nature, right? So what you want to do is you want to take a Google Sheet file or just a paper, and you want to start in 15-minute increments is what I did. And I would write down, sent an email to a client. Then I worked on the books. Then I did some marketing. Then I, dealt with one of the operations managers. Then I did a sales call, and you start writing this down and audit your time over the next 2 weeks. And then once you have that report, you could start taking that time and you could say, all right, what are these things do I hate the most? Oh, I hate doing, the books. I hate managing the books. All right. Well, now start outsourcing that, whether that's maybe a VA, or maybe it's a fractional CFO, or maybe whatever the case is, whatever you're working on, start getting rid of those things that you absolutely hate doing. And you watch how much more you will enjoy running your business when those things don't depend on you anymore. And you will actually fall in love with your business again. And that's what happened to me. It got to the point where at that time I was like, wow, do I want to sell now? I'm like, damn, we're making $1.6 million in profit every year. I'm like, I don't know if I want to sell this thing. I'm not here every day. I'm working remotely. It doesn't depend on me. So you actually will fall in love with your business again. And that is the best advice I could give to anybody. And that's one of the reasons why I started my consulting company, because I'm like, I want to give this to other contractors, because this experience was life-changing for me.
Yeah. And I think to kind of wrap all that up, the beautiful thing about being in the world we live in today is if there's things you don't like to do, you don't have to hire someone full-time to do it.
Yes.
30 years ago, it's like, man, I have to have Peggy come in the office
Yes,
for 40
exactly.
hours to do 10 hours of work. Now it's like, find someone virtual, hire them part-time. They could be anywhere in the world and they can get it done. And you set the expectations like, hey, I'm going to pay you this to do this job because I don't want to do it anymore. It's going to take you 5 hours a week. Here you go. Here's,
Yes.
$100.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. 100%. And it's so funny you say that, because a lot of my clients, when I have this conversation, they're like, wait a minute. I'm going to have an employee. They don't come to my office. I'm like, no, they're virtual. I'm like, they don't need to come to your office. Like, that's the whole point, So yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I love finding tasks like that. And just, I have somebody right now, they literally 1 hour a day. That's what they work for me. And they do one specific thing. And then when they're done with that project, I'll give her another project. And I love it. It's a great way to scale,
There you guys have it. Do that time audit. Teddy Slack, thanks again for coming on the show, sharing your journey and providing a ton of actionable advice and wisdom for all the contractors out there as we continue on our journey to prosperity. Before we sign off, Teddy, where can our listeners go to keep in touch with you? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, best way is probably LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so just hit me up there. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where my podcast, Modern Contractor TV, where I interview other vendors and people that can help with contractors run their business, operations, sales, finance, that type of stuff. So yeah, you can check it out at Teddy_Slack is my YouTube handle as well.
You guys go. If you're a YouTuber, check him out there. If you're on LinkedIn, look up Teddy Slack. He's probably the only Teddy Slack on LinkedIn. So Teddy, appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Paul.